Michelle Capadia, Athletic, 10 NFL Draft Commandments, how to maximize chances for success and avoid disaster. Okay? So let's see what we feel about this. Maybe we disagree with some of them.
I do.
Maybe we feel like the Cowboys disagree with some of them.
I know they do.
First one, he says, commandment number 1, don't be overconfident in your ability to evaluate talent.
Okay, well, this is where I bleeped myself.
Yeah, you're an overconfident SOB.
I am. But I'm definitely willing to hear others out.
Well, it's just the idea that, listen, ultimately, this is a crapshoot.
Yeah, of course it is.
So there isn't anybody that can stand up and say, I absolutely crush the draft, or the first round of the draft every year. I know, like, my talent evaluation is that in such to where I'm guaranteed to make the right
yourself.
pick. Not many people can say that. And a recent study actually showed that just 31% of first-round picks sign a second contract with the team that drafted them.
Ooh, that's not a good hit rate.
1 out of 3 are being re-signed by that team.
No, you know where it's hard is the ones that you don't think are going to be good. Those ones turn out to be good. That's where I have issues with.
Well, and that goes back to really being overconfident in your evaluating.
Yeah.
Whether it's not just I evaluate this guy, he's going to be great, and you think you're so confident he's going to be great, and he's not.
Darn it, he was amazing.
That's the other thing. It's like, wow, I just don't see it with this guy. I'm
Man, that Brady
confident
guy
that he's going to suck. Yeah, I mean,
next thing you know, 7 Super Bowls later.
Countless examples of that. So that's a big one. Teams that believe they are better than their peers at identifying talent are more likely to make bad decisions in the draft. Teams that do everything they can to develop a smart, efficient process, but still realize they're going to miss on evaluations will be better set up for success. So that is commandment number 1 when it comes to kicking the NFL draft's ass. Number 2, when in doubt, draft for volume.
Okay, this makes sense. A lot of darts. I want my darts. This is why trading up and losing out on the picks, not the smartest move.
Yes, exactly. And so that's something where, he notes Baltimore Ravens GM Eric DeCosta is one of the best in the business. The Ravens are one of the best organizations in the business. He calls the draft a luck-driven process. And he's spoken openly about the idea that getting more swings is the way to go. And so when you look at it, like in the past 5 years, the Ravens have had 45 picks, which is tied for 5th most. Compare that to a team like the Bears, they've had 31 picks. That's the 3rd fewest during that span. So just as an example of like, yeah, you'd like to have as much volume as possible because ultimately a lot of these guys aren't going to pan out. So just the more that you can have, the better. Now, of course, you have to weigh it differently for early picks as opposed to much later picks. Sure. It's not like having 100 7th-round picks is going to be that big of a deal if you don't have any top 100 picks. But And that's the idea of like the Cowboys right now, where I'm like, man, the idea of trading up and giving up some picks. And the Cowboys are in a pretty good position because I know they got a bunch of picks in the 5th round. Like they have a pretty good number of draft picks as it's set up right now. And so you can look at that 2 ways. Oh, we can afford to, give up a few to go move up and get a guy. And I'm not completely anti-trade up throughout the draft.
No,
mostly
but in the first round, that's when you're going to have to give up the most capital to do so.
That's when you're giving up a ton. And so you can find good deals trading up and maneuvering the draft board once you get into the middle rounds of the draft. And so I'm always in favor of that. But in the first round, man, come on, that's a win now move. And speaking of win now moves, here you go. Commandment number 3. Only take big swings when targeting a quarterback. Now, what would you call a big swing? You'd talk about trading up in the draft. That's the big swing.
Like what the Chiefs did. You move up from the back end of the first round to go up to number 10 to take Patrick Mahomes.
And that's what we've talked about over the last couple of weeks when we bring up the idea of trading up. I've been like, man, you only do that for the quarterback, or you do that if you feel like you really are a team that is on the brink of Super Bowl and you feel like there's this one talent that's just would really push your team over the top. And to me, that's pretty rare because it's such a team game. It's rare that one guy other than a quarterback can really have that kind of effect on you. There's a handful of guys, there's a handful of talents and skill sets that make you feel that way a little bit, but it's really the quarterback. You want to trade up and go get a quarterback, even if I don't like the quarterback personally, hey, if you guys decide you like the quarterback as an organization,
go do it.
And you think that's your guy, go get him. Because if you're right, you are absolutely going to crush because of it.
Right. And the only guy this year that I would do that for is Malik Willis, the quarterback at Liberty. I think he's got the upside for it. Otherwise, I probably would not spend the draft capital that's going to take to move up and do that, because I don't think there's a quarterback that is that gifted in this year's class to do that.
Yes. Now, the other commandment here, properly assess the abilities of your coaching staff.
Ooh.
So teams will often point to a prospect's lack of production and say things like, wait until he gets in our building and our coaches get their hands on him. We believe his best football is ahead of him.
Well, I think the Cowboys certainly hit a home run in this with Micah Parsons last year, and the way that Dan Quinn was able to use him and getting the most out of your player. You know, certainly I think that is the question we're talking about with a guy like Treylon Burks out of Arkansas. That's the fear that, you know, when we both done Trust the Tape with Broadus. We've got an episode out now that I recorded with Broadus last week. You can go and find that on 1053thefan.com and Apple iTunes podcast as well. Treylon Burks at 24. The question is, do you believe that Kellen Moore and the Cowboys will use him correctly? Well, properly assess the abilities of your coaching staff, or else maybe that's not the pick for you.
Yeah. And a lot of this stuff is, there's always, it's not a one size fits all with all of these commandments here. They're just friendly suggestions, and sometimes you can color outside the lines. Sometimes you can see a guy, identify a talent, and say, it's very objective here that the college team that he was on didn't quite use him properly, and I have a different vision for him. But to always just think, wow, my coaches are so superior to Alabama coaches or Penn State coaches or Ohio State coaches. And it's like, I mean, yeah, sure, but these are high quality, well-paid coaches as well in college football. So it's not like they're just a bunch of schmucks toying around with these athletes. It's like, these guys know what they're doing for the most part as well. So just be careful of that. But the Micah Parsons, Dan Quinn thing is a beautiful point. Now, here is commandment number 5. Incorporate the 2-minute rule for all first-round options. So, basically, anytime you're thinking of drafting a player in the first round, take yourself to the final 2 minutes of a one-possession game and ask yourself, can he help you win? If the answer is no, you should probably pass.
Love that.
So
it's a great simplistic way to make a great decision.
It's one of the ways that I like to evaluate the quarterbacks. When we talk about the best quarterbacks in the sport, I just say this. Okay, if I was playing him and he had the ball with a chance to go score and win the game, how much fear does he strike in me? And that tells me pretty clearly how dominant this quarterback is, where he should be when we do our quarterback rankings. If I give him the ball with a minute and a half to go and in one timeout and he's one score away, how scared are you? And that'll tell you probably how dang good that quarterback is. So that's a fun one. That's not one that I had really heard before. He says last year, roughly 44% of all NFL games were decided by 7 points or fewer. So the margin for error is small. If your first-round picks are on the sideline in crunch time, it's probably going to come back to bite you. Now, here is the next one, commandment number 6. Employ the armpit test for individual prospects. What's that? Well, you want opposing coaches to feel a little perspiration when thinking about having to game plan for your team. The same applies to opposing quarterbacks or offensive linemen or corners who have to play against your guys. It says, let's take the Seattle Seahawks, for example. When they're writing up reports for defensive prospects, they should come up with the most likely outcome for each guy. They should then pretend they're Sean McSex or Kyle Shanahan. Will those coaches, 1, be circling the prospect as someone to attack and exploit? Or 2, will they be circling the prospect as someone to account for in protection schemes, passing concepts, etc. So if you haven't figured it out, you want the prospects who fit the second category there, okay? So this doesn't apply to every player, every decision, but it can be a useful exercise. I like that. That's another fun one. How are these other coaches going to game plan against this guy?
Sure.
Use data to fact check your narratives in number 7.
Right.
So that's pretty self-explanatory. Number 8, appoint a designated hater and hype man for each prospect. So basically,
good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, good cop, bad cop, and protecting against biases. You want to guard against groupthink,
right,
and you don't want to just fall in love just because everybody else is, kind of deal. The other one, know what other teams are trying to accomplish. Use it to your advantage. Absolutely. You know the team behind you is in win now mode. Okay, that's a team that might be willing to move up to go get a guy. That's a perfect trade back. Jared Sandler has just entered the bedroom here, and he says it's a Rangers time. So the final one here, Wolchuk, number 10, commandment number 10, NFL draft. Don't bleep it up. Don't overrate things that might not matter, which is basically like some coaches and GMs like to fancy themselves as psychologists or body language doctors, right? They think they can tell how coachable a prospect is based on a 15-minute interview at the combine, something like that. So drawing big conclusions from one little thing is like, come on.